Sometimes, the smallest choices we make in life, the ones we barely even think about, can change everything. A simple act of kindness, a moment of honesty, can ripple out further than we could ever imagine. But sometimes, those choices also carry a weight we do not see, a cost we do not expect. This is the story of a boy, an ordinary boy, whose one act of honesty touched hearts forever, even though it came with the greatest price of all. His name was Daniel. He was 16 years old, a quiet high school student in a small town in Ohio. Daniel wasn't the kind of boy who stood out. He didn't play football, he wasn't in the school band, and he wasn't the loudest voice in class. If anything, he blended into the background. His clothes were plain, his shoes worn from being passed down through his older cousin, and he walked to school most days because his family didn't own a car. But if you asked anyone who truly knew him, his teachers, his neighbors, the old woman who lived across the street, they would all tell you the same thing. Daniel had a heart that was too big for this world. He was the kind of boy who stopped to carry someone's groceries, who gave up his place in line when he saw someone in a hurry, who bent down to help a stranger pick up papers scattered by the wind. To him, kindness wasn't a grand gesture. It was simply the way he lived. One Friday afternoon, as the sun dipped lower and the streets of town grew quieter, Daniel left school with his backpack slung over one shoulder. His mind wasn't on homework or weekend plans. He was thinking about his mother, who had been working extra shifts at the diner, and about how he might surprise her by making dinner that night. He was thinking about his little sister, Lily, who had begged him all week to play catch with her in the backyard. As he walked past the corner store, something caught his eye on the ground. It was a wallet, brown leather, scuffed at the edges, stuffed so full it barely closed. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, staring at it. The street was empty. No one else seemed to notice. He bent down, picked it up, and opened it. Inside were credit cards, an ID, and a thick stack of bills, at least a few $100s, maybe more. His first thought was shock. He had never held that much money in his hands before. His second thought was of his family. How many groceries this money could buy. How it could help his mother pay bills. How it could make life just a little easier. But almost instantly, that thought was replaced by something else. A quiet, steady voice inside him. The voice of his father, who had passed away when Daniel was just a boy. His father had always told him, "Son, the world will test you in small ways before it tests you in big ones. And who you are in those small moments will show who you really are." Daniel knew what he had to do. He flipped open the ID card and saw the name. Robert Miller, an address just a few streets away. Without hesitation, Daniel tucked the wallet into his backpack and started walking. Robert Miller was a man in his late 50s, a local contractor who had built half the houses in town. But Robert's life was not as solid as the homes he built. He had been through a bitter divorce, his health was declining, and money had become tighter than he let on. That wallet contained not just cash, but important papers, documents he needed, bills he had to pay. Losing it had left him frantic. He had torn apart his truck looking for it, retraced his steps through town, and was sitting at his kitchen table with his head in his hands when the doorbell rang. He opened the door to see a skinny boy in a faded hoodie, holding out the wallet. "Sir," Daniel said quietly, "I think you dropped this." Robert blinked in disbelief, snatched the wallet, and opened it. Everything was still inside. Every bill, every card. How did you? Robert stammered. "I found it on the sidewalk," Daniel explained simply. "I figured you might need it back." For a long moment, Robert just stared at him. The relief that washed over his face was almost overwhelming. "Do you have any idea what you've done for me?" he said, his voice breaking. "You saved me, son. You don't even know." He pulled a $100 bill from the wallet and tried to hand it to Daniel. But Daniel shook his head. "No, sir," he said softly. "I didn't do it for money." Robert felt something shift in his chest then, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, gratitude, a reminder that goodness still existed in a world that often felt so cruel. But life is fragile, and moments of goodness don't always get the ending we expect. As Daniel left Robert's house, the sun had already set. The streetlights glowed dimly, and the neighborhood was quiet. He pulled his hoodie tighter around him and started the walk home, his heart light with the satisfaction of having done the right thing. But just a few blocks away, at the corner near the abandoned gas station, trouble was waiting. 3 older boys, teenagers from another school, known around town for picking fights, stepped out from the shadows. "Hey, kid," one of them sneered. "What's in the bag?" Daniel froze. He tried to step around them, but they blocked his path. They shoved him, grabbed his backpack, dumped it onto the pavement. Books and papers scattered. One of them spotted the corner of Robert's wallet sticking out from the side pocket. "Well, well," the boy said, picking it up. "Looks like you've been holding out." Daniel's chest tightened. "That's not mine. I just returned it. Please, just give it back." But the boys only laughed. They taunted him, pushed him, demanded he tell them how much money was inside. Daniel, desperate, reached for the wallet, and in the scuffle that followed, one of the boys shoved him hard. Too hard. Daniel stumbled backward, his foot catching on the edge of the curb. He fell, his head striking the pavement with a sickening crack. The boys froze. For a heartbeat, the night was silent except for the sound of their panicked breathing. Then, terrified of what had just happened, they ran into the darkness, leaving Daniel lying there on the cold concrete. When Robert heard the news the next morning, that a boy had been found unconscious near the old gas station, he didn't think much of it. But when the name reached him, when he heard Daniel, his world stopped. He rushed to the hospital, only to find Daniel's mother and little sister in the waiting room, their faces pale and tear-streaked. Daniel never woke up. The wallet that he had returned with such honesty, such selflessness, was now sitting on the table in the hospital waiting room, untouched, a haunting reminder of the boy who had carried it home. In the days that followed, the town mourned. The story spread quickly, how Daniel had found a wallet, returned it without asking for a reward, and then lost his life on the way home. At his funeral, the church was filled beyond capacity. People who had never spoken to Daniel before stood shoulder to shoulder, holding back tears. His teachers shared stories of his quiet kindness. Neighbors spoke of small moments when Daniel had helped them, moments they had almost forgotten until now. But the most powerful words came from Robert Miller. Standing at the pulpit, holding the very wallet that Daniel had returned to him, he said, his voice trembling, This boy reminded me what honesty looks like, what kindness looks like. He didn't just return a wallet. He gave me back my faith in people. And though he is gone, I promise you, his act will not be forgotten. I will carry it with me for the rest of my life." Years later, Robert would go on to start a scholarship fund in Daniel's name. Every year, one student in that small town would receive help for college. Not because they were the smartest or the most talented, but because they showed kindness. Because they lived with integrity. Because they reminded the world of Daniel. And every year, when that scholarship was announced, people remembered the boy who returned a wallet and lost his life. The boy who showed them that even the smallest act of goodness can outlive us. So what do we take from this story? We are often told that doing the right thing will bring rewards, that honesty will always lead to good outcomes. But the truth is, life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes doing the right thing costs us. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it takes more from us than we could ever imagine. But even then, especially then, the choice to do what's right matters. Because it plants a seed. It touches lives. It inspires others in ways we may never see. Daniel's story is not about the tragedy of a life cut short. It is about the power of a single choice. A choice that told the world, honesty still matters. Kindness still matters. And even if the world takes everything from you, the legacy of your goodness will remain. So as you go through your day, and as life presents you with those small tests that seem insignificant, like a wallet on the ground, remember Daniel. Remember that who you are in those small moments is who you truly are. And maybe, just maybe, your choice, your honesty, your kindness will live on long after you're gone.